Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Cam?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? Pocket politics with Phil and Cam. Why? Why are we doing this?
I think it's gonna matter.
The only thing they want to talk about is guns and abortion.
My own views, I want to see the Republicans get away from the social issues.
I'm not saying that Republicans are idiots.
So you hear something like that, it's powerful.
As an American, I was disgusted.
You could make the argument that you're probably more in the middle as well.
I think that's just a story that somebody's telling.
Again, well, with the facts, this is true. Everybody knows
What
it.
facts?
So-
What facts? Who does this hurt more, Republicans or Democrats?
Boy, I've been thinking about that.
Welcome back to Pocket Politics. How was your week this week, Cam?
It was good. How about yours?
Pretty good. So not too much going on in the news, but we'll get through what we have. There were actually some decent developments this week, but first and foremost, kind of some sad news. We lost a member of the House of Representatives this week. We're also going to talk about the leader of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes. We've got some Alex Jones updates and some more Trump updates. Seems like every week we're just going to have to talk about him still. And then a couple of pieces of legislation passed through the lame duck session, and we are headed into the Georgia runoff, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But before I turn it over to you to start, Cam, please go visit us on our social media sites. You can link to all of them through our website, pocketpolitics.co. All right, the Virginia congressman from the 4th District. Cam, what do you have?
Again, some sad news. Representative McEachin passed away this past week. He was 61 years old. Longtime politician out of Virginia. The man had served different roles throughout his time in Virginia or in Virginia politics, and most recently had been in the House of Representatives, had just been reelected to another term. I think it was his 4th term when he just a few weeks ago, and he just again passed away this past week. He'd been battling cancer for a few years now. So certainly sad news there. Rest in peace to the Representative McEachin on that one.
Yeah, and we're no longer in November, but for men's health stuff too, he had prostate cancer, and complications with that, I think, are what led to his death. So
Phil, not to cut you off there, but I believe it was colon cancer.
Sorry, colon cancer. Same part of the body, just different, different equipment. But thanks for correcting me. But just awareness out there for men's health. Please, if you are at that age where you need to go get checked, go get checked.
Absolutely.
With that being said, the couple things on his history. I mean, you mentioned he'd been in there since 2017, but I believe he was the first black man to serve as a Virginia State Attorney General. So some interesting stuff there. But yeah, definitely sad news. Do we know? Are you aware of how they go about replacing House seats in the state of Virginia?
I was thinking about that earlier, and I don't have an answer for you on that. So that'll be a little bit more research on my part. Hopefully get us an answer on that next week, because obviously they're going to have to replace him.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and we'll get that answer out there for all our listeners. Moving on to a more controversial or nefarious character, Elmer Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keeper, was sentenced this week. So him and a person named Kelly Meggs, they were convicted of seditious conspiracy charges and multiple other charges related to January 6th. And there were other people as well. So I think 3 other co-defendants were all acquitted of seditious conspiracy, but still found guilty on plenty of other crimes. I believe they were all found guilty on obstructing an official proceeding, and some of them were found guilty on conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. What do you got with Stuart Rhodes?
I mean, here he is back in the news again. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The seditious conspiracy, that's a big charge for him and Meggs. That is something that we don't hear about that every day. It's been a while, obviously, since that charge has come out. You're right. Then
Since the Civil War, right?
No, it's been more recent than that. I think there was something in the 90s where they convicted some Islamic terrorists, basically, on seditious conspiracy. I was reading about earlier today. But regardless, it doesn't happen very often. You mentioned the three others that were in cahoots and linked up with Rhodes. Lesser charges, nonetheless found guilty on some things. It's important to note, too, Stuart Rhodes himself didn't go into the Capitol on the day of the riot, on January 6th. But Rhodes was outside the Capitol cheering people on. Onlookers and witnesses that day said it was almost like he was some kind of field marshal general standing out in front of the Capitol, cheering people on and waving them inside, etc. So even though the man didn't breach the Capitol, so to speak, and bust in there and start rioting and, vandalizing, etc., people still looked at his actions and what he said and what he was driving people to do, and that was enough to find the man guilty, along with Meggs. So now I don't have all the details exactly on what Meggs did, if Meggs was in the Capitol or not, but I know Rhodes wasn't. Nevertheless, his actions drove it. Seditious conspiracy. The guy's found guilty. We'll wait and see on the sentencing. Phil, do you have any idea what kind of jail time this guy might do?
Well, so it's a little bit tricky because I haven't exactly been able to figure out all the other charges, just from lack of research that they were convicted of. But the seditious conspiracy charge by itself is up to 20 years. So those two could face up to 20 years for that charge alone. And like I said, it can't be... There's probably going to be some added times. I'm sure they'll probably get anywhere from 12 to 16 from that one charge, and then add-ons for the other charges that they're convicted of. The lawyers said they were going to appeal. Do you think that goes anywhere?
Probably not. Of course a lawyer's going to try and appeal it, but I don't see it. Not in this case. I think it's too high profile. I'll be interested to see what they end up getting sentenced with. You say 12 to 16, you think on the seditious conspiracy. Obviously, that's, you just kind of speculating on that, and we'll see in these extra add-ons. But, Stuart Rhodes, he's not young. When you think about it, he was born in 1966, so the guy's in his mid-50s. This guy might, if he starts doing 20-some years, he may be a pretty darn old man when he gets out of jail.
Yeah, exactly. And you are right. It is strictly speculation. I just, from my impression, I don't think that anybody gets maximum sentences anymore. That's just not a thing that judges hand out as often as people would think. So I doubt that he gets the full 20 for that one charge, but we'll see. And then, like I said, the add-ons with the other charges and more to follow. What do you think? We could probably expect that maybe before February.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe before the springtime, but it could even be before February, I guess.
Yeah, I think I actually meant by February, probably by the end of the month.
By February, yeah. I was going to say springtime, which is obviously a little bit after that, but yeah, I give it a few months, I think we'll know, and I think everybody's going to kind of be waiting to see what this guy ends up getting out of the deal, and also his sidekicks here. So, yeah, definitely a blow to the Oath Keepers. We'll see going forward. How much this puts a nail in the coffin of some of these other anti-government groups, etc. I certainly don't think it's going to squash them, but it's probably not something that's going to, help their cause either, if you will. I think they're probably going to be certainly set back from this, at least the Oath Keepers. So, yeah, we'll see going forward, Phil.
Oh, yeah. And to move on, we told you there'd be updates, more, conspiracy theory peddling crazies out there. Alex Jones has just filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This follows his previous filing that was from one of the parent companies of his company InfoWars, the podcast and website that he runs to peddle bullshit, basically, for a small fee. Due to the $1.5 billion in damages that were awarded to the Sandy Hook families, he's basically said that he doesn't have that money and needs to file for Chapter 11. Thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, apparently that was his big thing the other day on his InfoWars podcast was like, literally, I'm out of money. I mean, you talked about $1.5 billion that he owes the Sandy Hook victims. I mean, this guy, he's got all kinds of craziness going on. I mean, I don't know what's he going to do now? Just continue to peddle or attempt to peddle more dietary supplements on his Infowars podcast, or not even podcast, whatever it is, his radio thing. Is that a podcast, Phil, or how do you even get that Infowars thing? As you can tell, I'm not a regular listener.
I'm not even sure. I think you have to subscribe through his website in order to see it, but it could be on one of those weird news stations or something that occasionally, depending on what cable plan or what plan you have, might show up on. I don't really know, but I do know, I believe you can subscribe through his podcast, because he's pretty much been taken off of, he's been, banned from basically every social media, YouTube included, so you can't even find his stuff on there. The one thing I will say is that the New York Times was reporting that the way these Chapter 11 filings work, it will open up scrutiny into his financial records, and he's going to have to turn over a lot of more detailed stuff about his business financials and his personal ones. So this could even open him up to more, him having to pay more money in those damages than he's trying to do. And there was already that case that said he had been reallocating assets previously, and that judge, I think in New York, had come out and said something about it and was like, no, you're not going to do that just because you were awarded all these damages.
Yes, I'd heard something similar. And I mean, again, we've talked about this guy in the past, but I mean, think about what he's put his or these families of these victims from Sandy Hook and some of these other mass shootings through. I mean, some of these people, these family members have had death threats themselves because Alex Jones has convinced his listeners that these people were making up the stories of their children getting killed. There's that story of that 7-year-old that died at Sandy Hook who, a bunch of Alex Jones supporters were out urinating on the 7-year-old's grave. I mean, we could go on and on with these crazy stories, but I mean, Alex Jones has brought this on himself. And I guess now that he's running around saying he's got more money, or no money, I mean, again, you did this to yourself. Phil, does this guy now go off the air or go off his website? Are we going to put this guy to bed, or is he going to manage to hang on and continue going with his InfoWars?
I mean, it appears that there's nothing that can stop this dude. He's like one of those people that just never goes away. The thing about this is he's still broadcasting his show regularly and selling all his vitamin supplements and his, metal plated underwear or whatever it is to keep the radiation out of your crotch. Who knows? He peddles all this stuff.
Metal. I'm sorry. I was just laughing at that. Metal plated underwear. Is that something he's actually sold?
It might be, but I have no idea. I just made that up. It just seems like something crazy that, you could convince people that believe in conspiracy theories to think that, the government's targeting your people's balls with your radiation or something. I don't know.
I'm sorry. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, but he's still at it. I mean, this week he had Kanye West on, so we're like a week after Kanye has Thanksgiving dinner at Mar-a-Lago with, another, racist, white supremacist asshole, Nick Fuentes. He goes on Alex Jones InfoWars and starts spouting all the same stuff, right? A day after that, he posted, did you see the Twitter symbol he posted?
I didn't, but I heard about it.
Yeah, it was a combination of a swastika and a David Star.
That's what I heard, yeah.
And then, moments after being allowed back on Twitter, he was subsequently taken off. And I doubt it's because, Elon Musk is worried about that kind of behavior. He's probably more worried about not losing every single sponsor that he has on that platform.
That interview with Kanye West. I mean, first of all, I don't know what Alex Jones thought he was doing. Well, I guess it's Alex Jones, but bringing him on, I didn't hear the interview. I read some of the transcript from it. It sounded like even Alex Jones was getting uncomfortable with what Kanye West was saying. As Kanye West started talking about good things, in his words now, not mine, but how he felt there was good things Nazis had done and they weren't all bad people, and he liked things about Hitler. And even even Alex Jones was pushing back on that, saying, wait a minute, I don't agree with Nazis. I don't see where they did good things. They did this, that, and the other. And then apparently Kanye starts spewing off about how the numbers were incorrect from the Holocaust. And Fuentes was on there. So, of course, he's been a Holocaust denier for years. But apparently Kanye West is a Holocaust denier now because he's literally saying it on the air. So another crazy interview, not a shocking. I mean, again, yeah. For the people listening, I guess, to Alex Jones, they shouldn't be shocked.
It should be said that it takes a little bit of a mental leap to like deny the Holocaust, and think Hitler's good. You know what I mean? It's not just something you slip and fall into, like, oh, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. I mean, that actually takes some work, to get to that line of thinking.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And like I said, even Alex Jones didn't want to go there. So, I mean, that shows
I love that mention that Kanye's too crazy for Alex Jones. Like, that's the world we live in, folks.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, I don't want to be sitting here necessarily defending Alex Jones, but in this one particular case, he had even had enough. So he was like, well, wait a minute. So, yeah, a whole group of crazies there. Speaking of crazy, though, Phil, do you want to take us to this week's Trump news? There's a few highlights coming out of there.
Yeah, so I think, the biggest things is we had the kind of backlash from the Thanksgiving dinner, so people are speaking out on it. Multiple prominent Republicans came out and basically condemned it, while though multiple prominent Republicans also didn't say shit. Maybe they're not taking the bait. Maybe they just don't think it's that bad of a thing. Who knows? But we've actually got a clip of Mitt Romney kind of talking about it. We'll go ahead and play the clip.
It's disgusting to invite people like that to meet with a former president of the United States. I think it's been clear that there's no bottom to the degree to which President Trump will degrade himself and the nation.
All right, so there you go with what Mitt Romney had to say. The other thing that we had, before I get to your thoughts, Cam, the other thing that we had come out this week was the judge in Florida that was not in the correct jurisdiction. I know we had mentioned that when Aileen Cannon first started talking about it, or when she first came into the news, but she had basically put in place the special master. She got smacked down by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, a 3-judge panel, all appointed by Republicans. 2 of them were Trump appointees. And they basically said that her own legal argument undoes her legal argument for the special master. So some pretty scathing reports from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the special master is now out of a job. Those documents go straight back to the Justice Department, and Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, came out and basically said this is a big win, and we are going to be able to proceed forward at full speed with this Mar-a-Lago documents case. So 2 things for you to comment on there, Cam. What do you think?
Well, looking at that 11th Circuit, I'll just say that has not been a kind group of jurors or group of judges for Trump at all. I mean, that 11th Circuit, like you said, pretty conservative group of people, and Trump has suffered at their hands a few times now. So again, the special master thing is, hey, we're moving on, I guess. Just a lot of news coming out of this. I mean, honestly, looking at the headlines, Trump had another bad week. I mean, let's not forget, Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin, right? His old special counsel, they had to go and testify in front of a grand jury. I think that was yesterday they had to go do that. They said Pat Cipollone was in there like 6 hours testifying. I think Philbin like 4.5. Down in South Carolina, the Supreme Court down there ruled that Mark Meadows must go down and testify in Georgia, and that whole fiasco. I mean, up in New York City, attorneys here at the end of the week delivered closing arguments in that whole Trump tax fraud thing. So
yeah, and I don't know if you heard about that too, but Trump's lawyers got basically scolded by the judge in that case in New York as well. There was some testimony that for some reason had been struck, or some evidence that had been struck from the record that the jury wasn't supposed to see, and they tried to slip it into their closing arguments and basically got reprimanded in front of the court for that. I mean, it's like one thing after another with this guy.
I'm kind of curious what Cipollone and Philbin had to say. Aren't you, Phil?
Well, I don't think it's anything good. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've already heard some things, obviously, from the January 6th committee with those two. But yeah, I think, again, it'd be interesting to see how some of that stuff plays out. But I think you and I could both agree it was yet another bad week for Trump. But he's still out there running for president, so we'll see how that goes.
And keep in mind, like Cipollone and Philbin, we've talked to them at length, especially when the January 6th hearings were going on. But the clips that we saw of that testimony were meant for to shock the American people. A jury probably gets a very different, a different slice of the pie per se, or they get the whole pie, And then the fact that they're, down testifying in front of a grand jury, that's even worse because a grand jury is all lawyers, right? It's all former attorneys. So I don't know. I mean.
And I mean, Phil, 6 hours. I mean, man, that's a lot of time. Like, there's a lot can be said in 6 hours that Cipollone was in there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just think about the fact. So he's in there talking for 6 hours, not to a jury of Trump's peers, but to a jury of attorneys, exactly. That are appointed. I mean, it can't go well. There's nothing good coming out of this for him.
Exactly. So, yeah, definitely. But Trump wasn't the only thing in the news. We did have some stuff coming out of the lame duck session here. First one being that some news on the same-sex marriage bill. Looks like we had, or that bill got through the Senate, 61 to 36. 12 Republicans voted for it, joined all the Democrats, I should say, to vote for it. Essentially what it does, it protects marriage recognition. In other words, it doesn't, my understanding of this bill that they pushed through, it doesn't protect same-sex marriage or the right to have same-sex marriage in every state. In other words, that every state must practice it or allow it. But what it does protect is if you have been married in a state, you could move to a state that didn't have same-sex marriage, and that state had to recognize your marriage.
It also now allows, because I think this was something that had been pretty controversial with like Hobby Lobby, and like there was that cake decorator in California that didn't want to bake the cake for the gay wedding. And it allows them to still do that. I honestly think that's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you don't want to bake a cake for somebody that you don't believe in, you should be allowed to do that as a business owner, especially a small business owner. It's like if I sold Pocket Politics and and we made any money off of this thing, and there was an advertiser that neither you or I agreed with, we shouldn't be forced to use that service. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Correct.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I know people may get all up in arms, and I'm a big social liberal, so maybe I'm bucking the mold. I don't know, but I just don't see that as a bad thing.
Well, and Phil, along with that, I mean, I agree with you on that. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, these are private companies, many of them small businesses, especially like that baker and that famous cake thing. But this whole religious exemption kind of piece that they put in there, that was kind of a key part to get some Republicans on board. Some were on board from the beginning, like Susan Collins, who co-sponsored the bill. But I think putting in the religious exemptions piece, as they mentioned, I think that brought Mitt Romney on board and a few others and helped them get over the 60 vote threshold on this one. So, yeah, I mean, I think it worked out. This is something that some senators have been working on for a while. It was bipartisan efforts, got through. Yeah, I mean, fairly cut and dried. It's made its way through. Should easily get through the House, and the president, I think, will sign it no problem.
To just go back briefly, I do want to say, while you should be allowed to not bake a cake for a gay wedding if you don't want to, it's a stupid fucking business decision. So, like if you're in the business of baking cakes, bake the cakes, right? Like, that's why, like, if Twitter, which I think is a cesspool, wants to start advertising us and paying us money tomorrow. Twitter, if you're out there listening, I would probably take the money. But either way, that's not the case.
Yeah, I think Phil, I think to your greater point, what you were getting at earlier was like, if you own a business, you ought to be able to do what you want with your business.
Yeah, if I don't want people without shirts and shoes on inside my store, I should be allowed to do that, right? whether it's that or any other fundamental, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So we have that. The one thing I was going to touch on, did they even need the 60 vote threshold for this one? I mean, it doesn't involve any money, does it?
I thought they did, because they were big on trying to get enough Republicans on board to, or at least the way I was reading it, they were trying to get enough Republicans on board to get over 60. So my understanding, Phil, was that they did need it.
Okay, and then who are the three assholes that didn't vote?
So,
I mean,
yeah. So, okay, I'd have to go back and look. There was a Democrat that was not there because of, boy, I don't remember now. One of the Democrats wasn't there, and I forget which. Oh, it was Warnock, I think. Warnock just wasn't there because I think he was down in Georgia working on his campaign, which we'll touch on a little later. So I believe Warnock was not there to vote. The other two, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look, Phil. I don't have the answers on them.
Yeah, and of course we don't allow proxy voting anymore for whatever reason. I don't understand, but that's part of that as well. And in bigger news, I think bigger news because it relates to one of my favorite topics, which is the labor movement. We've got this railroad deal, Cam. Basically the railroad unions, 12 of them had negotiated for several things back in September. They had negotiated a deal originally, and then 4 of the unions were not happy with it, so they backed out. What are your thoughts on this? Government has to get involved. We basically get a vote, much more narrow, much less narrow, 85 to 15, to basically Congress, or the Congress to enforce the deal that was agreed to back in September.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's probably not good when Congress has to step in and settle disputes. But I mean, I think it kind of felt like they probably needed to in this point, or in this case, I should say. Phil, you nailed it kind of with the unions and what they were negotiating on earlier. At the end of the day, right, getting this thing through, I think was good news to keep the rails going. The workers, it looks like, will get a pay increase out of this. Looks like a 24% pay increase over the next 5 years. There's some bonuses in there. I think like $5,000 bonus. Apparently, they've got 1 sick day out of this instead of the 7 that they were asking for.
It's considered a personal day. I don't know why they wouldn't even call it a sick day.
Okay.
But it's
okay. I had read sick day, personal day. Okay. Personal day, whatever. Biden, though, or President Biden had warned that this labor strike, if it went forward, which would have been December 9th, would have been the day they were threatening to start the strike. If that would have went through, that would have cost, in his words, $2 billion a day. And I think the president just felt like he was in a tough spot and he had to get the ball rolling on this. I know he's come out a lot and said he's very pro-union and such. And in this case, he was kind of pinched there between the unions and, do I side with the unions or do I try and get something going with to get the strike averted? And I think at the end of the day, Phil, nobody wanted to see this strike going on. I think people, came together in the Senate, whatever, Congress to get this going. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's good that we've averted the strike. The president and some others have said that they're going to try, into next year to come back and try and fight to get some more of these sick days on the books for these railway workers. So we'll see how that continues. But again, I think, especially before the holidays, Phil, I think this is good news to see that this strike was or is not going to happen.
Well, yeah, and it is good news from a couple different points. So first and foremost, right, like the rail industry is a huge part of our supply chain and economy kind of structure in the country. So one, it's important that we don't lose that right before the holidays. The other thing is for a majority of the rail workers themselves, right, because the union strikes doesn't mean every single worker wants that strike. And some of them are willing to go with certain deals and give up certain things, kind of a negotiation as it goes. And so at the same time, when the union goes on strike, there is serious pressure on those who do or don't cross the pickets for various reasons, right? And so if you go on strike and you don't cross the picket line, you don't get paid either, which would potentially jeopardize a lot of those workers themselves right before the holidays, which is not good either.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, so it's good. It's good for now. What we got is good, but realistically, right? Like this shouldn't be a railroad paid sick leave issue. This should be a nationwide paid sick leave, right? Like whether it's 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, I don't care, but you should have a couple of days for paid sick leave for the entire economy, right? Especially when we are still coming off a global pandemic. The flu is particularly bad, especially this season. Who knows if that's just going to be the new normal? We've got this other thing called RSV. Yeah, it mostly accepts kids, but guess what? People have kids, and if their daycares can't take them, people may need to take a sick day, you know? So I think, you know, we're way behind the rest of the developed world in this area. This is something that just has to be addressed. You know, I'd be hard-pressed to find many normal working Americans that are like, oh no, screw that, you shouldn't get any paid sick, you know.
So I was actually surprised that they didn't have any sick leave, and there were actually, you know, a few pretty conservative Republicans, Ted Cruz being one of them, Josh Hawley another, who seem to be fighting for these sick days as well. So we're seeing it kind of from both sides of the aisle, people wanting it. We'll see, you know, coming after or into the next, you know, year as we get into the next Senate and Congress, et cetera. We'll see how this goes. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I did want to point out, too, that I think when it comes to railways, I think people sometimes forget just what all is moved on railways. It is, you know, all kinds of agricultural products, you know, getting, you know, grains out to market, getting feed into farmers for livestock. I mean, getting petroleum.
I feel like you could just summarize it with food. Like food is moved with rail. Like that's, you know.
But it is. I mean, but yeah, okay. But I mean, petroleum, we could go on, but there is so much moved on railways in this country that I think a lot of people just don't even think about it. I mean, they drive by train tracks or they see a train going occasionally, but I think a lot of times people just don't stop and realize what is moved on those railways. And so, yeah, this was, again, it was good to see that we're keeping them moving, Phil. We'll see going into the next year where we go with this sick leave and stuff. But I think you and I both agree this was a good thing to keep this strike from happening, especially before the holidays.
Absolutely. And I do want to talk about, I want to keep going on this one, but you mentioned Cruz and Hawley. But I'll be honest with you, the 6 others that voted in this 52-43 vote, or this of the 6 total, some of the others, I mean, these are not middle of the road conservatives. I mean, these guys are some of the staunchest conservative guys in the Senate. I mean, you mentioned Cruz and Hawley, but also on that are Lindsey Graham, Kennedy from Louisiana. I mean, that guy is very, very conservative, right? And then Marco Rubio, as well as Senator, is it Brown or Braun?
Braun out of Indiana.
Okay, yeah, I get confused because there was a basketball player for the University of Kansas. He's not there this year, but he spelled the name the same way, but went by Brown. But either way, those guys are not the typical compromising senators that you see on a lot of other legislation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, I would, and that's why I think it was kind of worth mentioning. I mean, Marco Rubio basically said that he didn't like the fact the government was going to have to get involved, but if we were, then he didn't want to see workers getting screwed over on their sick days. He said something to the effect, I mean, I didn't quote him exactly there, but something along those lines. And this was something that Bernie Sanders was pushing through, and Ted Cruz, after he jumped on board with it, apparently in the Senate, he walked over and fist bumped Bernie Sanders and said, hey, I don't know or he goes, I just supported this. He goes, I'm with you on this. And he goes, I don't know if this hurts you more, the fact that I got on board with you, or it hurts me more, the fact you and I are together. But either way, I'm with you on this one. And then apparently Bernie Sanders kind of chuckled and patted him on the back and said, see, I knew you were a socialist all along there, Ted.
Yeah, which is pretty funny. But I will say that there's because I'm a nerd when it comes to economics and the labor market. There's some other dynamics to this too. Like, it kind of looks more and more like the railroads did this to themselves. The reason they can't budge on this paid sick leave and they're so fragile in the first place to a strike is they have slashed employees over the last several years. So 20,000 employees in the railroad industry lost their jobs. 20,000 in the year 2020. Over the last 6 years as a whole, they've shed 33% of their workforce, so a third of their total workforce they've gotten rid of. You got to think some of those employees, I mean, I get it, some of this is probably due to automation and other stuff, but some of those employees could have probably been the guy that gets called in, or has to work a little bit extra when somebody else calls in sick, right? Or that has the option to pick up a shift when somebody else calls in sick. So they've kind of set themselves up. Not to mention, right, and, I know you and I fundamentally agree on some of this stuff, but, in the first 9 months of 2022, 3 of the largest railroad companies made $21 billion in profits. That's in 3 quarters of the year, not even the full year. And I just don't think that making their stance on 7 days of paid sick leave is, like, what they want to do. You know what I mean?
I want to go back to a figure you just said a little bit ago. You said however many thousand lost. I think it was 20,000 people lost their jobs in 2020. I wonder if some of that was due to railways not moving as much during the COVID pandemic. It was interesting you said that one particular year. And again, I'm not saying this to try and dispute it or anything like that, but I just wonder if that one particular year saw a slowdown in railways in general moving things, right? Because of pandemic and everything that was going on. So I wonder if some of that could have been from that pandemic year, because you mentioned 2020. So
2020 was the only one I was able to find a statistic on, right? So that's the only one I have. Now, I read an article saying that jobs were slashed in 2019 as well, but I didn't get any numbers, so I didn't include it in there. The thing that I think is telling is that in the last 6 years overall, so 6 years time, they have shed 33% of their workforce.
Yeah, I don't know enough about railways and, how that all operates to know. You said it earlier, some of it probably is automation. So I don't know enough about the ins and outs there, but I would assume some is automation. Not sure though exactly who was cut, how it all went, but like I said, I think overall though, right now, at least we've got a path forward and we can keep the railways going.
Yeah, I think to my greater point is that regardless of automation or whatnot, is it so hard for them to treat employees a little bit better when the CEOs are taking home $21 billion in profits in the first 9 months?
Well, I just don't. Just the CEO. I mean, that's going to be investors and all that. So
obviously shareholders that hold the most and get payouts, get dividends. At the end of the year, but I still don't think $21 billion is a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, and again, this fight for this sick leave is not going away because apparently it's going to come back into the next year and we'll see. So the interesting thing is going forward is we'll see if Hawley, Cruz, Senator Braun and some of these others continue to push for that. I mean, if this indeed goes on into next year and they kind of come back for it. We'll see if some of these people are still on that side and kind of beat that drum. But definitely things to watch for.
Who knows? But for the most part, that is really all the news we have. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the Georgia runoff. Before we get into that, though, again, another plug for our social medias. You can link through pocketpolitics.co. There's little icons you can click on that will take you to every single one of them. But I told you I had a surprise for you, Cam. You asked me if it was going to make your blood boil or raise your heart rate. And I told you no. The surprise is that we now have a YouTube channel. So 21 of our episodes are uploaded on the YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and type in Pocket Politics, you will have to scroll down because we're not big enough to be the first on the list. But you scroll down until you find our Capitol logo. It's a picture of the Capitol with some clouds above the American flag waving, and it says Pocket Politics. And you click on that. And you can go there if that's a better place to listen, and we will start uploading there weekly as well, and maybe even produce some video content for our listeners. so they can get out there and see us go head-to-head live or shortly after the fact. What do you think about that, Cam?
I think that's great news here, Phil. It's always good when we can expand like that, and so if we can broaden our listenership through this, good job on that, and nice effort moving forward. Definitely, like you said, jump on to our various platforms, social media, etc. Like us, follow us, and continue to give us feedback. We do appreciate it all. Phil, I do want to get in a little bit on this Georgia runoff, though. This is some big news coming up, and next week is the time here on Tuesday. Looks like Senator Warnock's up a little bit in the polls. I saw one earlier today. He's got him up by 4, not a huge lead, but a lead nonetheless. And I think another big thing to note coming out of the state of Georgia is they have had massive early voter turnout, which, quite honestly, probably looks good for Warnock. So what are your thoughts here on this big election or big runoff election this next week?
Well, my thoughts are basically this. If you had to choose between a vampire and a werewolf, and you could only be one of the two, which one would you be? Because I'm going vampire all the way, right?
I guess if you're asking me, I haven't given that one a lot of thought. I know where you're going with that, but more craziness out of Georgia.
Yeah, so, I'm alluding to the comments that were made earlier this week at a press conference, or actually it was last week, at a press conference from Herschel Walker. I mean, the guy he's got to stop running his mouth. Like, he goes out there, they get him on camera, he's saying all this crazy stuff, talking about being a werewolf or a vampire. Man, his best chances are dwindling with the fact that he keeps, that his handlers aren't keeping them strict on the script when it comes to speaking at some of these things. So, yeah, I was kind of going for a joke there. Like I said, I would choose vampire all day. But President Obama was down there campaigning. He had some comments on it. It just, I don't know. The early voting doesn't look good for Walker. The polls don't look good for Walker. People aren't down there. I mean, the governor has kind of chipped in a little bit, but he hasn't really chipped in a lot. It also doesn't help, too, that a lot of these Republicans were raising money to help Walker get elected in the runoff. And it came out, it was reported like 2 days after we found out there was going to be a recount or a redo on it, that 9/10 of those dollars being raised by big Republican names were not going to the Walker campaign. So I don't think he stands a chance. I
think it's going to be really close. I know I've beat the drum on Walker for a while, saying that I think he's going to win. I think I said that a week or two ago on the podcast. I will say, based on what I'm reading now, I do have some doubts. I think momentum is with Warnock. You mentioned Brian Kemp. I think that is one bright spot for Herschel Walker. Governor Kemp has been getting involved. He is pretty popular in Georgia. We'll see what he can do to help get some momentum there. I mean, Kemp's no dummy. I mean, I'm sure when he hears Walker saying some of the things he said, he probably in the back of his mind is thinking, oh boy. But there have been some other Republicans that have gone down there and try and stump for him. I think Lindsey Graham's been down there. There's been some others. There's definitely some Republican movement down there. I just think candidate quality, though, it matters, right? I mean, to go back to yet again what Mitch McConnell said, a couple 3 months back, right? It does matter. We saw it play out in this last election. Like I said, Warnock's got the momentum right now. I mean, we'll find out next week, but Phil, I think it's going to be a close race. I will say that. I don't see this being a runaway for either one, whoever ends up winning it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a 10-pointer by any margin, but I think we're certainly going to see 4 to 6 points.
And that'll be something big to watch here this upcoming week. So
absolutely, and we will talk about it next week.
But looking at the time here, Phil, I think we've gotten through everything that we wanted to get through. And looking at my notes, they're pretty well all checked off here. So I think with that being said, one last time, get on our social media, like us, follow us, please listen to our podcast. And I think it's time for our parting shots here. You want me to go first this week, Phil?
Yeah, sure. What do you got for us?
All right, well, I'm going to slip out of the political realm here for my parting shot this week, and I just want to mention a little bit of sad news. So People that know me know I'm a big outdoorsman, and one of my outdoor pursuits, I really enjoy fly fishing. And here recently, a fly fishing icon, Mr. Dave Whitlock, has passed away. He was 87 years old, and he died of a stroke. Whitlock, a lifelong Oklahoma native, has been the kind of guy that has gone out and fly fished for just about everything. He's written several books on fly fishing and fly tying, and he's also authored many articles in various fly fishing publications. I've been a fan of his writing for years. I've enjoyed his fly patterns that he's put out, etc. So I just want to say that, a shout out for Mr. Whitlock. Rest in peace. You have definitely influenced many fly fishers, including myself. So thank you for all you have done for the sport. That wraps up my parting shot. Phil, over to you.
All right. Well, this morning, the USA played the Netherlands in the World Cup round of 16, which is a knockout round, so it's single elimination. We, unfortunately, were eliminated despite the best, a really good game played. We really, I'll just say that the youth and lack of international experience of our team kind of showed its face today, and you could see just a couple of key mistakes. They gave up 3 easy goals to the Netherlands. Nothing they scored was particularly hard to get, and we were able to get 1 goal back when it was 2-0. So we looked like we were still in it there for a second, and shortly after that, Netherlands scored the 3rd goal. So the U.S. is eliminated. I will say, I think that are we meeting expectations, kind of threshold was just making it to the round of 16. So the fact that we got to play against one of the biggest teams in the world in the round of 16. And I won't say we held our own, but we stayed in it until the very end. So it wasn't a thrashing by any means. I think we met expectations for this really young team. They were the youngest, the second youngest roster in the World Cup as a whole, and they were the youngest roster in the round of 16. Which is 32 teams from different countries around the world. So I think I'm pleased. And 4 more years go by, we will, have the World Cup on home soil in North America, and the team will be that much more experienced, and I think we've got a good path forward. But disappointing news this morning. I was not in a very good mood at, 9 o'clock in the morning with that result. But it is what it is, and that's all I got. Go Team USA, go Baby Eagles. Better luck next World Cup. With that being said, that's all I've got. Anything else to add, Cam?
No, that's it. I think it's been another great show. Thanks to everyone for listening, and until next time.
All right. Bye.